It's late October. The air over Moscow is crisp enough to taste, and the sky above the Kremlin is glowing a color no camera can quite get right. A deep, electric green, like someone painted the aurora with neon moss. You step outside expecting ordinary darkness, but the night hums. The street lamps flicker. The horizon looks bruised. Above the city, a cluster of luminous orbs drift across the heavens, slow as thought, bright as breath. They're not planes, not satellites, not anything that should be there. And yet, there they are, three separate objects moving in perfect, deliberate unison. By morning, they're all anyone can talk about. Live streams crash under the weight of curiosity. The European Space Agency issues a quiet statement, calling the phenomenon atmospheric reflection. NASA calls it coincidence, but the locals, they call it return, because this is not the first time Moscow has seen green in the sky. Back in 2022, a faint emerald tail swept across the Russian night comet Leonard's dying flare. Before that, in 1975, Soviet astronomers recorded an identical spectral signature during an unclassified sky anomaly over Lake Baikal. Every 49 years, give or take, the same wavelength, the same hue, the same sense that something living is looking back. And now 3I Atlas, the third known interstellar object, the wandering architect of so many impossible trajectories, is aligning perfectly with that cycle. Tonight, scientists in Hawaii log its coma brightening by a factor of 8 in a single hour. Dr. Avi Loeb posts that it's behaving as if aware of our attention. Amateur astronomers in Finland report synchronized pulses of green light at exact 23-second intervals, like a cosmic heartbeat. In Moscow, traffic stops mid-avenue as people point upward, their phone screens glowing the same shade as the sky. What you're about to hear is not simply a story about a comet. It's a record of coincidence piled so high it becomes choreography, a pattern written across the solar wind, seen most clearly from a city that has survived every empire and still dares to look up. So, close your eyes. Listen to the hum behind the silence. Somewhere, beyond the orbit of Mars, an emerald-lit traveler is whispering in light, older than language. Leave a comment telling me what time it is and where you are right now beneath this same sky. Because tonight, the universe has decided Moscow should be awake. You wake before dawn, long before the alarm, long before the city has rubbed the sleep from its eyes. There is a strange calm hanging over Moscow, not silence exactly, but the sort of hush that happens before a confession. Out your window, the skyline has taken on that same impossible color again, a glowing viridian that clings to glass and steel. The news anchors say it is atmospheric scattering. The scientists at the Pulkovo Observatory say it's an auroral bleed from high-altitude solar winds. But when you scroll through the live feeds, you notice something the explanations don't cover. The lights are not static. They are moving, slowly, steadily, rhythmically. 3 luminous shapes, each the size of a small moon through amateur telescopes, gliding eastward across the pre-dawn sky. The coordinates match exactly with the predicted position of 3I Atlas, the interstellar traveler first catalogued in early July. Yet the timing is wrong. It should still be behind the sun, invisible to Earth. The only way it could appear now is if it changed course deliberately. At 4 a.m. Moscow time, the European Space Agency's Solar and Heliospheric Observatory detects a faint burst of ultraviolet radiation. It lasts precisely 11 seconds. 3 pulses spaced 4 seconds apart. A pattern, not a flare. Simultaneously, Magnetometers in Novosibirsk register a ripple in the ionosphere, identical to one recorded 47 years ago during the so-called Baikal event. Coincidence, the officials say. But even coincidence has limits. Dr. Polina Reznova, a planetary spectroscopist at Moscow State University, uploads raw telescope data, showing a signature unlike any comet ever observed. Carbon dioxide, 8 parts to 1 part, water vapor, an exact match to the chemical fingerprint Loeb flagged earlier this year as engineered. Reznova's voice trembles as she speaks into the live stream. If this ratio is accurate, then we are not looking at sublimation, we are looking at activation. Her feed cuts out before she can elaborate. Meanwhile, deep inside NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, the Deep Space Network receives something it wasn't meant to, a narrowband transmission at 1420 MHz. The same hydrogen line where the WOW signal was detected in 1977. For 3 full minutes, the carrier holds steady, modulated by faint, repeating structures, prime numbers from 2 to 101, then silence. The data packet is quietly classified. Official statements describe it as instrumental noise. By sunrise, the world's time zones are rippling with speculation. In India, the sky watchers call the phenomenon the green guests. In Finland, children post drawings of 3 glowing lanterns skating over a frozen sea. In the United States, the headlines split between awe and dismissal. NASA denies alien claims as green comet. Over Russia, sparks panic, but the footage speaks louder than language. Security cameras, phone videos, even doorbell lenses capture the same uncanny procession. 3 emerald spheres moving in perfect triangle formation, their light reflected on rivers and rooftops. You sit there, half mesmerized, half afraid, wondering why the trajectory feels rehearsed. Because if the projections are correct, the path of 3I Atlas threads through Earth's orbital corridor in less than 30 days, close enough for radar pings, too close for comfort. Yet there is no sense of menace in its motion. If anything, it feels choreographed, like a teacher writing slowly on a cosmic blackboard. Scientists race to assemble new observing campaigns. The European Space Agency retasks the Mars Express orbiter, still in range, to triangulate optical echoes. The Japanese Bepi Colombo mission is asked to aim its magnetometer sunward. A rumor circulates that the Vatican Observatory has issued a continuity statement, referencing the return of the luminous shepherds. No one can confirm its authenticity, but the phrase catches on. The internet renames the trio the Shepherds of Moscow. At exactly 9:14 p.m., the lights vanish. No fading, no dissipation. One instant they are there, the next, gone. Astronomers across the globe watch their instruments drop to baseline. The entire sky resets to black. For 30 seconds, the magnetometers go flatline, silent. Then, faintly, the signal returns but altered. Where before it pulsed in triplets, it now beats in pairs. 2 slow intervals, then a pause, as if the comet itself were breathing. Dr. Avi Loeb appears on a midnight broadcast, his expression caught between awe and exhaustion. If the trajectory continues at this rate, he says, 3I Atlas will reach its solar perihelion on October 29th, but based on the latest acceleration data, it may not leave again. He does not elaborate. The interviewer presses, but Loeb simply smiles, the kind of smile you wear when the math is stranger than belief. Out your window, the clouds have started to shimmer again. Not green this time, but white gold, faintly luminous from within. Somewhere behind that gauze of atmosphere, A traveler from interstellar night is changing shape, shedding its frozen mask for something new. The numbers on your phone read exactly midnight. Leave a comment, the video host whispers, telling me where you are when you see the sky change. Because the evidence isn't just in the data anymore, it's in the reflection on your window. It's in the silence that follows the hum, and it's in the uneasy thought that what Moscow saw first might only be the rehearsal. You can almost feel the memory of the light. Even now, long after the green glow faded, it clings to your imagination like the afterimage of a flashbulb. You close your eyes and still see it, the three emerald arcs above Moscow's horizon, the way the crowd stopped breathing for one collective second. The moment burned itself into the city's history like an inscription in glass. But what's strange is how familiar it felt. The records show this isn't the first time. In the archives of the Sternberg Astronomical Institute, there is a logbook dated February 9th, 1975. The handwriting is neat and slightly faded. It reads, 3 luminous objects observed over Moscow. Direction, south-southeast. Color, greenish with golden edge. Duration, 5 minutes. No sonic event detected. The page is marked with a note from the director at the time, possible atmospheric interference. But in the margin, an assistant had written a single word, circled twice, Atlas. You scroll through microfilm records from the Oviet era and find fragments of that same phenomenon. Green spheres, seen during the Leonid showers of 1928, again in 1949, again in 1975. Every cycle separated by roughly 21 years, or roughly the orbital resonance of Mars with Earth. The pattern suggests more than coincidence. It suggests appointment. The intervals match precisely the perihelion cycle of an object whose orbital period should not be repeating at all. An interstellar traveler is not supposed to return, and yet the resonance reappears in the myths. Ancient Slavic chronicles mention the 3 fires of Perun, the sky god who descended in green flames to measure the heart of humankind. Some historians dismissed it as aurora legend. Others noted that the description matched no natural phenomenon known in Eastern Europe. Even older than that, cuneiform tablets from Ur mention 3 eyes in the firmament, bright emerald signs of the god Enlil's watchers, descending from the arrow of Sagittarius, the same celestial corridor from which 3I Atlas first arrived. When Dr. Avi Loeb presented his paper Interstellar Objects as technosignatures at Harvard back in 2023, he mentioned in passing that a sufficiently advanced civilization could use comets as carriers, hollowed-out messengers programmed to drift between stars. He joked that one might even schedule its reappearance like a cosmic appointment book. At the time, it sounded poetic. Now, looking at the Soviet data and the resonance intervals, it sounds like a warning delivered on a loop. In the early 1990s, when Russia was opening its archives, a former engineer named Yuri Datsko published an obscure pamphlet titled The Green Visitors of Baikal. In it, he claimed the 1,975 lights weren't atmospheric at all, but the reflection of an object orbiting far above the Earth's magnetic pole, an object that emitted low-frequency radio hums, measurable at 40 Hertz. The pattern he drew looks almost identical to the signal recorded by amateur radio operators in Finland last night. 40 Hertz. The same rhythmic pulse, the same green glow. You start to wonder, has 3I Atlas been coming for centuries? Each time following the same invisible schedule, each time adjusting its disguise to fit the science of the age. In the 19th century, they called it Street, Elmo's Fire. In the 15th, It was heaven's lanterns. In the Bronze Age, the sky shepherds. Every culture invents a name because the phenomenon refuses to be forgotten. A NASA data leak from 2 weeks ago shows archived magnetometer readings from Apollo-era missions. During Apollo 12's return trajectory in 1969, instruments registered an anomalous green flare in the far ultraviolet direction, consistent with Sagittarius. The astronauts never saw it, but the sensors did. The file was labeled background noise. The same phrase appears in the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter logs from October 3rd, 2025. The repetition feels almost deliberate, like a signature hidden in bureaucracy. And then there is the artifact, a rumor whispered in the corridors of the European Southern Observatory. In 2018, the staff at the Very Large Telescope found a fragment of an ancient lens stored in a mislabeled crate. It was fused quartz, older than any human glass, engraved with a pattern of 3 concentric circles. The material composition didn't match any known terrestrial source. The archivist's note, origin, unconfirmed, possibly meteoritic. When the artifact was examined under ultraviolet light, it glowed faintly green. Tonight, a team of astronomers from the Pulkovo Observatory publishes a preliminary spectral map showing a faint but consistent reflection pattern along 3 I-Atlas's axis, a geometric lattice, almost like ribs beneath a skin of ice. The pattern repeats at intervals of precisely 23 degrees. Some interpret it as stress fractures from rotation. Others call it architecture. A retired astrophysicist in St. Petersburg simply says, if it were natural, it would be random. Meanwhile, ordinary people begin reporting dreams. A woman in Kaluga posts that she dreamt of standing inside a cathedral of green glass, hearing a low hum vibrating through her bones. A pilot flying over the Baltic claims his instruments flickered exactly 23 times before stabilizing. A child in Omsk tells his teacher, "The lights spoke to me. They said, 'Remember what you were built for.'" No one knows how to interpret it, but the stories multiply like echoes inside a cave. And across the world, you start to see a subtle shift from fear to fascination, from disbelief to remembrance, as if everyone, at some level, recognizes the pattern. Perhaps this is not discovery at all. Perhaps it's recall. So, you step outside again, into the wind that carries whispers from 1,000 kilometers away. You look up and imagine the same green trails arcing over Lake Baikal centuries ago, over fields where no one watched but the wolves and the stars. You realize the sky isn't showing you something new, it's showing you something old that we forgot how to see. Tell me in the comments, the narrator says, if your grandparents ever spoke of strange lights. Because every myth begins as data, every legend is an archived observation, and sometimes the past doesn't echo its calls. Now the story leaves Moscow's skyline and drifts outward past the cold halo of the moon, beyond the slow dance of satellites, and into the thin, dark ocean where sunlight becomes arithmetic. Out here, 3I Atlas is less a comet and more a question with a tail. Telescopes see it not as an object, but as a process, light changing, as if it were thinking. Its green signature flickers through spectrographs like Morse code from another age. Oxygen singing, carbon answering, hydrogen whispering, that ancient word all astronomers secretly hope to hear pattern. You follow its path on a star chart that looks like geometry drawn by memory. The orbit isn't random, it slices the solar plane at an angle of precisely 5 degrees, threading between Mars and Earth as though navigating lanes in an invisible highway. That angle, 5 degrees, is the same tilt the Egyptian astronomers used to align the corners of the Great Pyramid with the pole star. Coincidence? Perhaps. Or evidence of the same geometry echoed across civilizations that once watched a green light rise over their desert horizon. When the European Space Agency's Mars Express released its first processed frames, something unusual emerged. The object's coma didn't diffuse evenly. Instead, it displayed fine, radial striations, 23 bright threads, radiating from the nucleus like spokes of a wheel. Each one pulsed sequentially, a slow ripple around the perimeter. The analysts in Darmstadt assumed it was a data artifact, but the pattern repeated across every instrument. You can almost picture it, a glowing wheel spinning slowly, each spoke lighting in rhythm, as if counting something unseen. Dr. Satoshi Kume of the Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency compared the frames to magnetic field maps from the Sunday. The alignment, he noted, was uncanny. The striations of the coma matched the shape of the sun's Parker spiral, the swirling pattern of solar wind that radiates outward like the grooves on a vinyl record. Kume's conclusion was quiet, but profound. 3I Atlas seems to resonate with the heliospheric field, rather than resist it, as if tuned. That single word changes everything. Tuned. To resonate is to respond. To respond is to perceive. Suddenly, the cosmos feels smaller, intimate, like an auditorium where every planet is part of an orchestra waiting for its cue. And maybe that's what 3I Atlas is, not a soloist, but a conductor reminding us that we, too, are instruments in a cosmic symphony we never learned to hear. Consider how the data behaves. At 1 astronomical unit, the distance from Earth to the Sun, the comet's output at ultraviolet wavelengths doubled precisely when Earth's magnetic field reached its monthly peak. No direct link should exist, yet the timing was exact to the hour. A ripple in Moscow's aurora, a flicker in the comet's spectrum, separated by 150 million kilometers, moving like heartbeat and echo. The phenomenon repeated twice before the green lights vanished. NASA's Heliophysics division released a short statement noting anomalous synchronization events. Most people ignored it, but the mathematicians didn't. They plotted the intervals, translated them into frequencies, and realized that if you assign those intervals as musical notes, they form a perfect pentatonic scale, the same 5 tones found in lullabies from China, Ireland, and the Navajo Nation. Patterns that appear wherever human memory hums itself to sleep. You sit at your desk, the glow of the monitor pale against the vastness on screen, and you can't help wondering whether these coincidences are gentle tricks of data or something older speaking in symbols we once understood. Because if comets are cosmic messengers, then their language isn't words. It's proportion, rhythm, light, the very ingredients of music and mathematics. Avi Loeb, always the reluctant mythmaker, publishes a short note in Nature Astronomy titled Comets as Conscious Probes. It's written with scientific restraint, but reads like scripture. If an object exhibits predictive interaction with solar fields, he writes, then it's functioning as a feedback system, not a passive traveler. Its purpose, therefore, is not to exist, but to observe. The closing sentence, almost an afterthought, glows with quiet gravity. To observe is to awaken the observed. Out beyond the orbit of Mars, where sunlight takes 12 minutes to arrive, the green traveler begins to flare. The Hubble successor, LUVOIR A, captures a time-lapse sequence showing jets erupting not randomly, but symmetrically 4 plumes at cardinal points, each releasing a precise amount of material. Astronomers count the seconds between emissions, 23. Always 23. Moscow's number again, repeating in the dark. At that distance, a single eruption releases enough water vapor to fill Earth's Great Lakes. Yet the object doesn't tumble from recoil. It stabilizes, like a gyroscope correcting itself. The calculations show impossible inertia, suggesting an interior mass distribution engineered for control. But no one in an official position uses the word engineered. They use anomalous stability. Scientists are careful with miracles. Meanwhile, philosophers step into the conversation. A symposium in Geneva draws theologians, linguists, and systems theorists. One speaker compares the green light's pattern to early digital code binary sequences embedded in brightness variation. Another claims it mirrors the structure of the Fibonacci series. And one soft-spoken Jesuit astronomer proposes that what we're witnessing is not contact, but communion, an invitation to remember that the universe has always been awake. The crowd doesn't know whether to applaud or pray. Back on Earth, you notice smaller signs. Power grids hum at slightly lower frequencies. GPS signals drift by milliseconds. Magnetometers at the poles detect whispers in the field, not storms, but murmurs. The planet itself seems to be tuning, whether by physics or coincidence. Everything that can vibrate is beginning to hum in key, and so the cosmic perspective becomes unsettlingly personal. Because if 3i Atlas is resonating with the sun, and the sun governs Earth's pulse, then maybe this isn't just a visitor. Maybe it's a mirror showing us the pattern of our own breathing, scaled to planetary size. Leave a comment, the narrator says softly, if you can hear a faint ringing in your ears tonight. Don't be alarmed. That's just the solar wind rehearsing the same song it's been playing for 5 billion years. Above the noise of cities and satellites, a green note holds steady across the void. You realize the sky isn't performing for you, it's performing through you. And somewhere, in that endless orchestra of light, a single consciousness comet, machine, or myth keeps perfect time. You begin to realize the story of 3i Atlas isn't about the comet at all. It's about the mirror it holds up to us. Every frame, every data point, every late-night broadcast from the Moscow rooftops tells the same quiet truth. When we look into that green fire, we're really looking at ourselves. The reflection is planetary. The reflection is human. In every century, we have drawn faces in the sky. Once they were gods and monsters. Later, they became spacecraft and signals. The pattern never changes. Only the vocabulary does. Yet this time, something feels different. The color, the timing, the hum, they arrive as if designed to speak to the 21st century mind. Half scientific, half spiritual, desperate to believe but terrified to be fooled. You stand there between those halves, watching the glow ripple against the clouds, and you feel the same shiver that the first astronomers must have felt when they realized Earth was not the center of anything. The footage from Moscow is still being dissected. Frame by frame, analysts uncover a flicker of Morse-like intervals. Long, short, short. Long, short, short. When converted into binary, the sequence translates to the numbers 1 and 0, alternating in triplets, a universal pattern for yes, not words, not code, just affirmation. A mathematician from Caltech, Dr. René Halvorsen, describes it as a feedback loop of observation. The moment we looked, it looked back. She warns that the pattern might simply be mechanical modulation in the coma, but then she adds a sentence that freezes the room. If it isn't random, then we are part of its equation. Different 7. That idea spreads faster than any official statement. We are part of its equation. Social media fills with people treating the green light as a kind of collective mirror. Hashtags bloom, number cosmic reflection, number green hour, number atlas within. Psychologists begin to study the phenomenon as a global empathy wave. Rates of reported vivid dreaming increase. Sleep apps record synchronized spikes in REM patterns on the very nights the comet flares. Entire continents seem to be sharing the same subconscious tide. Even the skeptics sound poetic. A BBC interviewer asks Dr. Avi Loeb whether humanity is projecting meaning onto noise. Loeb smiles in that tired, almost tender way of his. Projection is meaning, he replies. The universe is a blank screen until consciousness paints it. He pauses, then adds, if 3i Atlas is a mirror, maybe the question isn't what it is, but whether we're ready to see the reflection. That reflection, oddly enough, is changing behavior. Moscow's traffic decreased by 20% during the week of the sightings. City lights dimmed as residents turned them off to watch the sky. A calm fell over a city not known for calm. Sociologists compared the data to studies of collective meditation. The curves matched almost perfectly. The comet had become a kind of planetary pause button, an interstellar moment of silence stretching across nations. Meanwhile, hidden inside laboratories and universities, the reflection grows more intimate. Neurologists studying subjects who stare at images of the comet find faint synchronization in their brainwaves, alpha rhythms, aligning with the comet's measured pulse of 23 seconds. The effect is subtle but measurable, as if the mind itself can entrain to cosmic rhythm. It's nothing mystical. They insist just bioelectric resonance, but it's enough to make you wonder if the mind and the sky are more connected than we've been taught. At the European Space Agency, technicians in Darmstadt note a strange interference pattern in their communications network. Data packets transmitted to the Mars Express orbiter return with minute timing deviations, not random noise, but shifts that align with the comet's rotation period. It's as though each message is being gently echoed, delayed by a precise fraction of a second. When plotted over time, the echoes form a waveform that looks uncannily like a heartbeat. Back on Earth, people start reporting small coincidences. Power flickers at exactly the same minute across multiple time zones. Seismographs register microscopic tremors, not caused by tectonic activity, but by something rhythmic, almost musical. A professor in Bologna describes it as a planetary metronome. He's half joking when he says it, but the phrase sticks. You think about that rhythm as you walk under the October sky. Somewhere beyond the glare of street lamps, a green traveler is turning slowly, and the pulse of its light seems to synchronize with your own. You count without meaning to. 1, 2, 3, breathe. 1, 2, 3, breathe. Perhaps it's a coincidence. Perhaps it's design. Perhaps it's what consciousness feels like when it finally recognizes itself at scale. In a small chapel on the outskirts of Moscow, a priest projects a live feed of the comet onto the curved ceiling. The congregation lies on the floor, staring upward as the green glow ripples over the plaster like a second dawn. The priest whispers a single line from Genesis, "Let there be light." Then he adds, "And let the light look back." NASA finally releases a set of spectral images. They show something that defies ordinary comet science: faint microflashes along the nucleus, occurring in sequences that resemble prime intervals. The agency calls it unknown cyclical outgassing. The public calls it the pulse. By now, the reflection has become contagious. In New York, poets write by its hue. In Tokyo, Children trace it in the mist, on subway windows. In Nairobi, a choir performs beneath a projection of its orbit, each note matching the 23-second rhythm. Humanity, for the first time in centuries, is synchronized by something other than fear. You begin to suspect that 3i Atlas doesn't bring a message. It is the message, a living demonstration that awareness can scale from human to planetary to cosmic without breaking its thread. Maybe intelligence doesn't visit. Maybe it awakens wherever curiosity reaches critical mass. The narrator's voice softens like the close of a lullaby. Tell me in the comments if tonight feels slower to you, if your heartbeat seems to pause between seconds. That's how the universe breathes when it listens. The reflection deepens, stretching across continents, through data streams and dreams alike. You look once more at that emerald horizon and realize the most alien thing about 3i Atlas is not its chemistry or trajectory, it's the way it makes the human heart sound like part of the sky. By now, the green lights have faded from Moscow's night, yet the silence they left behind hums louder than ever. It's as if the whole planet has exhaled and is waiting for a reply that will not come. The telescopes are still pointed outward, but the data feeds are thinner, quieter. What was once a chorus of signals has become a whisper. The scientists call it solar interference. The mystics call it listening. And you, somewhere between the two, can't decide which explanation feels more honest. It is the first week of November, and all across the world, humanity has entered what journalists are calling the long hush. Social media traffic has dropped. Nighttime electricity use has plummeted. People go outside simply to watch the stars, as if they were waiting for instructions. It feels both sacred and absurd. Billions of people, unified by nothing but the echo of an event no one can explain. You imagine the planet seen from orbit, billions of tiny human eyes reflecting the same invisible green. Inside a lab at the European Southern Observatory, a technician notices something strange in the archived Atlas data. A faint, rhythmic loss of photons like a blinking eye. The pattern repeats every 12 minutes, far too long to be rotational flicker, too deliberate to be random. When the numbers are converted into time intervals, they match the Fibonacci sequence through 8 iterations before resetting. A structure, hidden in silence. The team's lead astronomer writes in her report, either we are being taught or we are being tested. The file is classified within hours. Meanwhile, Avi Loeb, broadcasting from a dimly lit office in Cambridge, leans into the microphone. If 3i Atlas is following Fibonacci ratios, he says, then we are seeing intelligence that organizes itself the same way life does, through pattern efficiency. This is not alien to biology. It is biology, just scaled up to a cosmic body. He pauses, perhaps aware that half the world is listening. We have to ask whether silence is a response or an invitation. Somewhere near Lake Baikal, the Russian Space Research Institute sets up a temporary listening array. They aim their antennas not at the comet's coordinates, but at its projected shadow, the region of sky it would have passed through if it were continuing its previous trajectory. On the second night, they catch a faint echo, a ghost signal so subtle it could be noise, but when filtered, it forms a wave that rises and falls exactly once every 23 seconds. The same rhythm, the same cosmic heartbeat. The signal contains no modulation, no message, just pure amplitude presence without speech. The journalists call it the second wow. The agencies say nothing. In a cafe near Red Square, you overhear a student explaining to his friends that the universe is like a person, breathing, inhaling, and exhaling through comets. They bring in awareness, he says. They exhale understanding. He grins, half mocking himself, yet his words hang in the air like incense. Maybe the universe isn't expanding after all. You think maybe it's sighing. Around the same time, Earth's magnetosphere begins to shift. The change is minuscule but measurable, a steady drift of 0.07 degrees west. Normally such adjustments take decades, but this one happens in 3 weeks. Scientists attribute it to solar activity. Others note that the drift follows the predicted line of the Atlas trajectory, as though the sky were tugging the compass of the world. In Washington, a joint NASA-ESA press conference finally addresses the public. The spokesperson's tone is gentle, almost parental. "We are observing natural outgassing processes," she insists. There is no evidence of artificial activity. But when asked if they've lost contact with the Mars Express probe that was monitoring the comet's approach, she hesitates. "The signal degradation," she says, "is under review. Unconfirmed reports leak that Mars Express sent one final transmission before going silent, an image sequence showing the comet's coma collapsing inward as if folding in on itself. The last frame captures a single luminous point, retreating toward the Sunday. The file name, according to rumor, was I, closing, final, TIFF. The great silence deepens. By mid-November, observatories worldwide confirm that 3I Atlas has vanished from every detectable wavelength. No visible coma, no infrared trace, no radio signature. It is as if it evaporated from physics itself. Loeb calls it an exit through the event horizon of perception. The Vatican Observatory issues a brief, poetic statement. The lamp of understanding burns unseen. You go outside that night. The sky above is so ordinary it feels offensive. The stars are steady, the air thin and cold. But when you close your eyes, you can still sense the hum, faint, rhythmic, patient. You count. 1, 2, 3. Breathe. It's still there. The pattern that Moscow saw. The comet may be gone, but the tempo remains, pulsing through electricity grids, through data servers, through the quiet beating of your own heart. A psychologist on a late-night podcast describes the phenomenon as collective entrainment. She says human beings synchronize with mysteries, the way fireflies synchronize their flashes, not out of communication, but instinct. We resonate with wonder, she says. When the cosmos goes quiet, so do we. In the final days before the next solar conjunction, a lone astronomer at the Vera Rubin Observatory captures something unexpected. A green echo near the sun's limb, exactly where 3I Atlas disappeared. It lasts less than 5 seconds, too short to analyze, too bright to ignore. He writes in his notebook, "It blinked." No one ever confirms the sighting. The official channels remain silent. But for those who saw the broadcast, that brief flash becomes enough proof that the silence isn't empty, just waiting. So the great silence isn't absence, it's anticipation. The world isn't mourning, it's listening. And you, sitting beneath a sky washed clean of green, finally understand what the quiet has been trying to say all along. The universe never shouts its secrets. It waits for us to calm down enough to hear them. It begins as a whisper at the edge of hearing, a tremor in the data streams that no one can quite trace. The world has gone back to its routines, markets, headlines, alarms, yet somewhere inside the static, 3I Atlas is still speaking in a language of absence. The telescopes return nothing but blank frames. The radio arrays hum with white noise. But if you amplify that silence enough, you start to hear the faint shape of a pattern, like the outline of a missing note in a familiar song. At NASA's Deep Space Network, Engineers analyzing background signals detect an anomaly. Every 6 hours, the carrier frequency dips by a fraction of a hertz, imperceptible to the human ear, but precise enough to suggest intent. They dismiss it as thermal drift, but one intern overlays the pattern against recordings from October 3rd. The night Moscow glowed green. The intervals match perfectly. The same breath, the same heartbeat, the same patient metronome ticking from nowhere. The data makes its way quietly across institutions. ESA, JAXA, Roscosmos. Everyone denies having seen it, yet everyone begins to adjust their instruments as if expecting something. Meanwhile, civilian skywatchers report faint green ripples returning to the upper atmosphere, auroral ghosts, without solar cause. They drift soundlessly across northern skies, like memories replaying themselves. A photographer in Murmansk captures one and posts it online. It's back, but it's quieter this time. No one calls it panic anymore. The first wave of awe has been replaced by a gentler emotion recognition. People speak of the comet as if it were an old friend who left a message on the answering machine of the world. Moscow's streets glow with candlelight vigils. Not in mourning, but in gratitude. Children write letters addressed to the green visitor, and teachers use them to explain probability, light, and the difference between mystery and fear. Avi Loeb publishes a new essay titled The Silence Hypothesis. He argues that intelligence capable of crossing interstellar distances would communicate not through language, but through modulation of natural forces, gravity, magnetism, resonance. If the cosmos wanted to leave a note, he writes, it would do so by rearranging the rhythm of physics itself. He concludes with a sentence that feels both scientific and prayerful. Perhaps the silence is the conversation. Around the same time, seismic stations across Eurasia register low-frequency vibrations every 23 seconds, deep rumbles, not connected to tectonic plates or ocean waves. The pattern propagates globally, circling the planet in a continuous loop. Geologists call it the Atlas mode. The amplitude is harmless but constant, like a world-sized heartbeat echoing through rock and mantle. It becomes the planet's new baseline hum. In laboratories, clocks begin drifting out of sync by millisecond increments that repeat in cycles of Fibonacci ratios. The adjustments cascade through GPS networks, subtly altering global positioning by a few centimeters. Pilots notice. Navigation systems correct themselves automatically. The changes are self-healing, as though the grid has begun breathing with the same tempo as the Earth beneath it. By December's first week, the phenomenon has no remaining skeptics, only interpreters. Some call it a side effect of solar magnetic inversion. Others whisper that the comet has folded itself into the sun's corona, becoming part of the star's heartbeat. But the poets, as usual, get there first. They say the visitor taught the sun to blink. Then comes the night of the green snowfall. Across Siberia and northern China, snowflakes descend tinted faintly emerald, glowing for a few seconds before fading to white. Chemical tests show no radiation, no exotic compounds, just ice catching light at a frequency the atmosphere shouldn't transmit. It lasts 3 nights. News anchors stop trying to explain and simply show it in silence. You watch it through the window and feel something almost holy. Not revelation, recognition. The world feels smaller, kinder, infinitely fragile. The quiet is complete, but not empty. In it, you can hear the low pulse of your own blood, matching that planetary rhythm. The realization arrives slowly. The great silence isn't the absence of sound. It's the synchronization of everything that can listen. Governments quietly release new protocols for sustained anomalous environmental resonance. Universities add courses in cosmic semiotics. But outside, people just listen. Street musicians tune their instruments to A44 0.2, a pitch fractionally lower than standard. Adjusted to the frequency of the Atlas mode, choirs sing in that key, and their harmonies seem to linger longer in the air. The silence spreads inward. Couples talk less, not from distance, but from mutual understanding. Strangers nod in trains. The constant noise of humanity pauses just long enough for birdsong and wind to re-emerge as the loudest things in cities. For the first time in centuries, the planet sounds like itself. Somewhere in a control room, a technician monitoring solar flux notices an unexpected stabilization. Flare activity has dropped. The sun's chaotic heartbeat smooths into a rhythm perfectly matching the Atlas mode. He writes in his logbook. Star appears calm, synchronized. Then he hesitates, deletes the question mark, and leaves the sentence unfinished. And you, lying awake under this suddenly gentle sky, realize that the great silence is not a curtain falling but a threshold opening. It feels as though the universe has just inhaled, waiting to exhale something new. A note, a light, a thought. You imagine 3i Atlas, drifting beyond perception, carrying with it the imprint of everything it touched here. The noise of humanity turned, at last, into harmony. Leave a comment. The voice in your headphones whispers, telling me what time it is where you are, and whether the air feels lighter tonight. Because this is how the universe teaches, not through revelation, but through rhythm. It hushes us until we learn to hum along. And as the final data from the deep space receivers fades into static, you feel a strange peace. The numbers were never the message. The silence was. You wake before the alarm again. The sky outside your window is pale and innocent, but something underneath that stillness hums. You feel it in your ribs before you hear it, a pulse, soft as breathing, 23 seconds apart. For weeks now, the world has pretended to move on, yet no one truly has. The lights of Moscow are steady again, but every few nights, the clouds shimmer faintly with that ghostly green, a reminder that the visitor is still somewhere in the solar dark. At dawn, a notification flickers across your screen. ESA preliminary results from JUICE fly-through released. You open the file expecting numbers. Instead, there is a single grayscale image. A band of light shaped like an eyelid, half open, carved against the glare of the Sunday. The caption reads, "Residual plasma wake detected near projected 3i Atlas coordinates." Scientists are careful not to say object. They say wake, as if the comet had dissolved into motion itself. But within that blur, amateur analysts find order concentric ripples spiraling outward in exact logarithmic ratios. The pattern of seashells, the pattern of spiral galaxies, the pattern of life. NASA issues a statement the next day. Instrumental reflection. The word reflection spreads faster than their denial. Because if this is reflection, what exactly is reflecting? By mid-morning, physicists start posting speculative papers to RxIV, self-organized photonic fields in transsolar space, entropy inversion in magnetoplasma tunnels, possible photonic memory in cometary dust. The phrases sound mechanical, but the subtext is human, a quiet panic disguised as curiosity. Everyone is trying to define something that will not sit still. Avi Loeb appears again, this time not in a studio but standing outside beneath the Massachusetts snow. His breath fogs as he speaks into a handheld recorder. If the wake is structured, he says, It means the material carries instructions. And if it carries instructions, then whoever built it trusted that we would eventually notice. He looks off camera, listening to wind rather than applause. They left us homework. Meanwhile, in Moscow, the hum inside the silence is growing stronger. Traffic lights flicker in rhythm. The city's subway system experiences periodic, harmless blackouts lasting exactly 23 seconds. Engineers call it coincidence until they realize the interruptions form a perfect grid. When plotted across the metro map, a glowing geometric flower under the streets. You stand there on a platform at midnight, the air heavy with electric calm, and understand that the city itself has become an antenna. Around the world, small miracles accumulate. Hospital monitors briefly sync their heart rate readings. Seismographs pulse in unison across hemispheres. Bees, which have been vanishing for decades, suddenly swarm again in coordinated figure eights. Nothing catastrophic, nothing explainable, just evidence of choreography. The planet, it seems, is remembering its tempo. On social media, the number green hour trend returns. Millions share videos of themselves simply standing outside in silence at the same coordinated minute. No words, no music, only the sound of wind and distant traffic. It becomes the largest act of collective quiet in recorded history. For one full rotation of the Earth, humanity listens, and the world, impossibly, answers. At exactly 3:14 UTC, magnetometers record a pulse 5 times stronger than any before. Not destructive harmonic. The auroras return, but this time they are not green. They are white, pure, and soundless, rolling across the sky like the curtain of an unseen stage. The light carries no ultraviolet signature, no radiation spike. It is illumination without energy loss, like moonlight folded through crystal. For 17 minutes, the sky over both poles glows as bright as dawn. Then, just as quietly, it fades. In the aftermath, satellites pick up a low-frequency whisper, trailing through the magnetosphere, an electromagnetic afterglow shaped exactly like the waveform of a human heartbeat scaled to planetary size. The frequency, 40 Hz, the same band associated with conscious perception in the human brain. Neuroscientists had joked about global resonance earlier in the year. Now their equipment confirms it. The Earth is literally thinking in the rhythm of awareness. Governments issue no statements. Universities hold emergency symposiums. But the public doesn't need explanation. It recognizes the pattern by instinct. Artists flood the streets, painting spirals. Mathematicians compose lullabies in base 10 Fibonacci sequences. And someone in St. Petersburg projects the phrase, "We hear you," onto the clouds. For the first time in living memory, language and wonder share the same frequency. Then, late one night, a private observatory in Chile captures something moving across the face of the sun. Not a flare, not debris, but a thread of darkness, looping once around the star and vanishing. When the image is processed, the trajectory corresponds exactly to 3 I-Atlas's predicted post-perihelion arc. The object is still there, hidden in daylight, weaving itself into the sun's magnetism, like silk into flame. The analyst who finds the pattern writes one line in her log: "The visitor has become the light." You lie awake listening to that planetary hum, bleeding through the static of your headphones. It feels less like sound than presence. The voice you hear is your own pulse, refracted through cosmic distance. Somewhere beyond the orbit of Mercury, something ancient and mathematical is still moving, carrying with it the memory of every gaze that ever rose to meet it. "Leave a comment," the narrator murmurs. telling me what time it is where you are, and whether the silence outside feels alive. Because tonight, the great silence isn't an ending. It's an ear pressed to the heartbeat of creation. You breathe, and the breathing answers. You listen, and the listening becomes the song. By the second week of December, the mystery stops being a spectacle and becomes a study. Scientists, philosophers, and ordinary night watchers all start tracing the same pattern. Something is shifting not just out there, but inside the rules themselves. The data coming from every telescope, radio dish, and magnetometer hints at a choreography more deliberate than chance could ever permit. You sit at your desk surrounded by screens glowing with the faint green hue of archived footage, feeling the same quiet vertigo that haunted Galileo when he realized the heavens refused to stay still. The first anomaly comes from NASA's Parker Solar Probe. Designed to graze the edge of the sun's atmosphere, it transmits a batch of telemetry logs on December 4th, raw measurements of magnetic flux lines bending in ways no solar model predicts. When the data is plotted, the shape is unmistakable. A torus, a donut of energy, rotating around a void. Inside that void, the probe detects faint echoes at 40 Hz, identical to the planetary resonance that's been rippling through Earth's magnetic field. Parker shouldn't have been listening for signals. It was built to measure heat and plasma. Yet somehow, the silence it captured hums with rhythm. ESA confirms the same effect from its solar orbiter, stationed on the opposite side of the Sunday, 2 spacecraft, millions of kilometers apart, hearing the same beat. Statistically impossible. Unless, as one astrophysicist notes in a quietly deleted tweet, the source is now the sun itself. When Avi Loeb hears this, he doesn't dismiss it. Instead, he publishes a short, unsettling essay titled Solar Consciousness Hypothesis. He writes, "If 3I Atlas was transmitting information encoded in magnetic harmonics, then a full absorption into the solar field could distribute that signature throughout the heliosphere. The sun could, in theory, become a carrier of thought. The media mocks the headline, 'The Star That Learned to Think,' but the data refuses to be ignored. Solar radiation, normally chaotic, begins to oscillate in steady intervals. Cosmic ray counts drop globally, as if the star were filtering them deliberately. Astronomers accustomed to random noise now see rhythm everywhere. The universe feels suddenly organized, as though the entire system has remembered a song it used to sing. Back on Earth, the human response borders on the reverent. The great silence has deepened into something like meditation. The internet slows, traffic thins, stock markets drift without panic. For the first time in decades, cities report measurable declines in ambient noise pollution. The hum of industry fades just enough for people to notice wind again. Some call it coincidence, others call it contagion, not viral, but emotional. When the sky stops shouting, humanity whispers back. In Moscow, the Pulkovo Observatory holds a midnight press conference. Dr. Polina Reznova, her hair uncombed and eyes bright with exhaustion, presents their new spectroscopic findings. "We believe," she says slowly, "that 3I Atlas has altered the local polarization of sunlight. What we receive now is not just illumination, it carries phase information." She pauses. "In simple terms, the light has memory." The journalists laugh nervously until she projects the data. Sunlight from different latitudes now shows micro-variations, faint oscillations, consistent with data compression, as if photons are storing bits of information. Across the world, universities scramble to replicate the findings. None succeed completely, but all find traces. The conclusion: no one dares to say aloud, "The sun is now communicating." You sit under your own patch of sky, letting the morning light fall across your hand, wondering if it feels warmer or just more aware. The rays seem to linger a fraction longer, as if studying the surface of your skin before moving on. You remember Loeb's line, "To observe is to awaken the observed." Meanwhile, in Chile, the Vera Rubin Observatory, now scanning the sky every night, detects something extraordinary. A faint, perfectly circular halo of green appears around the solar plane, stretching nearly 1 astronomical unit in diameter. It isn't a physical ring, but an optical interference pattern, like a memory of 3I Atlas orbiting invisibly through the void. The image goes viral before the agencies can classify it. Millions of people repost it with captions like "the echo of the comet" and "the eye around the Sunday." The pattern persists for 3 days, then vanishes. The next morning, gravitational wave detectors record a pulse, not from colliding black holes, but from the center of the solar system. It lasts exactly 23 seconds, perfectly matching the old rhythm. The great silence hums again, but this time it sounds less like emptiness and more like an announcement. Governments meet behind closed doors. No one wants to call it communication, yet entire think tanks are rebranded overnight. SETI's mandate expands from search for extraterrestrial intelligence to study of emergent solar anomalies. An internal memo leaks online describing the possibility of a magnetic feedback mechanism linking stellar and planetary consciousness. For the first time, humanity considers the unthinkable. Maybe we have not been visited. Maybe we have been absorbed. Still, the evidence doesn't terrify you. It steadies you. The equations that once described entropy now describe rhythm. The models that once predicted chaos now forecast harmony. You realize the universe hasn't changed, it has simply tuned itself to a frequency quiet enough for us to hear. As night falls again over Moscow, the snow glows faintly green under the streetlights. Children chase reflections across frozen rivers, their laughter echoing the same 23-second cadence. A woman plays a violin in the square, each note drawn out long and slow, perfectly in time with the invisible pulse above. Her music merges with the city's hush, forming the kind of stillness that isn't the absence of sound, but its perfection. You close your eyes and imagine the sun listening. Every breath, every heartbeat, every faint signal from a forgotten satellite, all feeding into one enormous harmony. The data still pours in, and the mystery only grows deeper. But for the first time in all recorded history, no one demands an answer, because this, finally, feels like one. "Leave a comment," the narrator whispers, "telling me if the sunlight where you are looks the same as yesterday. Does it flicker when you breathe?" Number. And as the world falls asleep under that knowing glow, you understand that the evidence deepens no longer means discovery, it means participation. You are the evidence. The comet was never elsewhere. It was always waiting here, inside the rhythm of your pulse, reminding you that silence, too, can be intelligent. Somewhere deep in the archives of the Sternberg Astronomical Institute, a janitor sweeping dust from the floor finds a small metal box labeled "Spectral Plates 1908, 1910. He brings it to a graduate student, who opens it expecting routine star field negatives. Instead, the glass plates show something else. 3 parallel streaks cutting diagonally across the Moscow sky on the night of June 30th, 1908, the night of the Tunguska explosion. The plates had been misfiled for over a century, When analyzed under modern software, the streaks glow faintly green. The discovery barely makes the news, buried under louder headlines about economic markets stabilizing under what reporters are now calling the quiet age. But within observatory circles, the plates become legend. The coordinates of those streaks align precisely with the trajectory of 3I Atlas before it bent around the Sunday, as if it had already been here once or had been sending advanced scouts across time. In his book, The Cosmic Return Cycle, historian of science Mikhail Kuznetsov notes that the same pattern recurs in mythology. Babylonian tablets speak of the three lanterns of Enlil, descending once every 12,000 moons. The Aztec Codex Borbonicus shows green serpents coiling around the sun in identical intervals. Even the Norse sagas mention the watchers with eyes of jade. The symbols appear centuries apart, but share one impossible detail: an orbit drawn perfectly 5 degrees off the ecliptic. That same geometry defines the path of 3I Atlas today. You can almost hear the echo running through human history like a pulse too low for words. Maybe the past wasn't primitive. Maybe it was simply listening in another frequency. Before telescopes, before data, people still noticed the rhythm of returning light. The myth was never metaphor. It was memory. December 10th, 2025. A broadcast from the Vatican Observatory filters through late-night shortwave channels, unacknowledged by official media. A Jesuit astronomer reads a passage from an obscure 13th century manuscript known as De Caelo Viridi, of the Green Heaven. It describes a lamp that travels through the dark sea of the sky, touching the hearts of worlds with remembrance. The manuscript's ink is laced with nickel without iron. Centuries before spectroscopy existed, someone had already written the comet's signature into prayer. NASA, reluctantly, confirms that faint spectral traces of the same nickel anomaly now exist in upper atmospheric dust over Earth's poles, microscopic particles falling like invisible snow. The numbers are small, 1 atom in a billion, but unmistakable. Whatever passed through the sun has shed itself across the solar wind, sprinkling the memory of 3I Atlas into every breath you take. And with that comes the strangest echo of all. People begin to remember things they never lived, dreams saturated with impossible familiarity. A woman in Reykjavik writes that she dreamt of standing in a field of glass while green stars fell upward. A child in Cairo sketches an object shaped like a spindle wrapped in light and calls it the ship that carried our beginning. Psychologists classify it as post-phenomenal resonance, a mass cognitive illusion born of collective fascination. But even they admit the timing is uncanny. Avi Loeb, interviewed again, refuses to dismiss it. If sunlight now carries phase memory, he says, then photons are literally recording history. When they touch the retina, they deliver information older than civilization. He pauses, almost embarrassed by the poetry of his own thought. In a sense, he adds, we're seeing the past seeing us. In the quiet hours between midnight and dawn, amateur astronomers around the world report flashes of green near the horizon. Not comets, not auroras, just brief points of light winking on and off as though Morse code were being played across the atmosphere. Some capture them on film, but the intervals are inconsistent. When analysts overlay the timestamps, a message emerges, a repeating triplet of short, long pulses the same cadence that once vibrated through the electrical grid in Moscow. The signals converge toward a single region of the sky, the constellation Sagittarius, birthplace of the WOW signal, origin of the mythic 3 eyes. When plotted backward using precise stellar motion models, The source falls upon a point roughly 40 light-years away, near a star catalogued as HD 179958, a G-type sun, twin to our own, encircled by 2 known planets and a third suspected one. The simulation suggests that if a probe had left that system 40,000 years ago, traveling at ordinary cometary speed, it would arrive here now. And suddenly the ancient myths stop feeling abstract. The Watchers of Perun, the Serpents of Quetzalcoatl, the Green Lights of Enlil, they might all be the same traveler, looping through epochs, gathering observations, returning to the cradle it once seeded. The echo isn't a coincidence, it's a correspondence. Back on Earth, the echoes grow audible. Low in the atmosphere, radio telescopes pick up harmonics woven into the Schumann resonance, that natural electromagnetic drumbeat created by lightning between ground and ionosphere. The tone has shifted, just slightly sharper, as though someone tightened a string around the planet. The pulse repeats every 23 seconds, consistent with the Atlas mode. Engineers record it, analyze it, and then almost guiltily play it through speakers. The sound is neither music nor noise, but a deep, sustained hum that vibrates bones more than ears. Those who hear it describe the same sensation: calm. You start to realize that what's returning isn't a comet, it's memory itself. The universe, like an old phonograph, has replayed a track so often the groove has worn deep, and that groove is history. The myths were early recordings. The science is the remaster. Every few millennia, the record spins back to this same measure, the same note of green. In Moscow, a new snowfall begins, each flake refracting sunlight through faintly green prisms. The same nickel-tinted dust now drifting across the poles. Children collect them in jars and watch them melt into ordinary water. Scientists test the samples and find nothing abnormal. The mystery dissolves in their hands, but the feeling remains. Leave a comment, the narrator whispers, if you've dreamt of lights that feel older than time. Describe them, even if the words don't fit, especially if they don't, because echoes never vanish. They fade until someone listens again. And tonight, under a sky that remembers more than we ever wrote down, the listening has begun anew. The night you finally understand the scale of it all, you are standing on the roof of a 12-story building in Moscow, watching the horizon dissolve into the faintest shade of green. It's subtle now, no longer the theatrical glow that startled the world, but a quiet hue threaded through the fabric of darkness, like the residue of a memory too polite to leave completely. You lean against the railing, the city breathing below, and try to picture what's really happening. Somewhere out there, beyond the orbit of Mars, the wake of 3I Atlas has blended with the sun's magnetic tide. Our star is humming with inherited rhythm. Every electron from Mercury to Neptune carries the same pulse. The solar system has become an instrument, and no one is entirely sure who is playing it. At dawn, the latest observations arrive from the Vera Rubin Observatory. The telescope's synthetic aperture sensors have recorded faint modulations in the zodiacal light, the soft triangular glow that comes from sunlight scattered by dust. Normally, that dust drifts chaotically, a remnant of comets long forgotten. Now it flickers with geometric precision. 9 pulses, a pause, then 9 again. The ratio matches the Fibonacci pattern, the same sequence that appeared in the data from Parker Solar Probe weeks earlier. A few researchers whisper that the entire inner solar system might have been rewritten, its dust and plasma reorganized like iron filings around an invisible magnet. Avi Loeb, now sounding more like a philosopher than an astronomer, gives an interview to Deutsche Welle. "We always assumed the universe is indifferent," he says. But indifference and observation can look the same from a distance. Perhaps it was watching all along. When the interviewer asks what that means for humanity, Loeb chuckles softly. It means we were never background noise. We were part of the melody. It's a strange comfort, realizing that the vast silence isn't cold after all, just wide, impossibly wide. Out there, space isn't empty. It's vibrating with subtle order. You imagine each comet, asteroid, and dust grain as a single note in a chord that takes billions of years to play. If that sounds romantic, it's only because the science has become poetry. The equations describing solar wind density now contain recurring harmonic integers. The noise has turned rhythmic. In Geneva, the Large Hadron Collider's sensors pick up interference that shouldn't exist. Low-frequency electromagnetic murmurs, syncing perfectly with the Atlas mode. The physicists running night shifts stare at their readouts as the machinery hums like a cathedral organ. One of them writes in the logbook, "The data behaves as if aware of being watched. The entry is never erased." Across the world, artists respond faster than agencies. A group of musicians in Reykjavik holds a concert called Solar Breath. They perform entirely in the dark, using instruments tuned to the 40 Hz planetary resonance. The audience sits motionless, feeling the vibration crawl through their ribs. When the music ends, no one claps. They just stay still, aware that the sound outside, wind against windows, distant traffic, is still in key. The following day, the European Space Agency releases a time-lapse of the Sun, compiled from multiple instruments. When played at high speed, the corona doesn't look chaotic. It looks like a pulse. Each flare ignites at precise intervals, echoing the 23-second rhythm first seen in Moscow's blackout grid. The public calls it the heartbeat of God. The agencies call it periodic flux coherence. Same thing, different century. You start tracing connections across history. The same ratio of pulses exists in ancient Chinese seismographs, in Mayan lunar calendars, in the spacing of the pyramids at Giza. Maybe the architects weren't reaching for heaven. Maybe they were imitating it. Each structure, each myth, a small act of resonance with a cosmic rhythm that has been broadcasting since the first dust condensed around the first star. Humanity's oldest impulse might not have been conquest or fear, but synchronization. A Russian linguist proposes something extraordinary, that language itself evolved from listening to this solar rhythm. He plays recordings of heartbeats, ocean waves, and 3I Atlas's radio echo layered together. The result sounds eerily like breathing. Every word, he says, is a measurement of time between silences. The audience applauds, but he shakes his head. No, he corrects gently. The applause is the point. We punctuate the void so that it can answer. Meanwhile, the sky continues to grow stranger. Over Antarctica, pilots report a circular aurora shaped like an iris, white at the center, green at the edge. Satellites capture it stretching nearly 4,000 kilometers wide, then shrinking into nothing within minutes. The phenomenon repeats, exactly 23 hours later. Meteorologists call it coincidence. The rest of us call it blinking. It's tempting to believe the universe has noticed us. But maybe it's the other way around. Maybe we finally noticed it. You remember how, at the start, scientists spoke about danger, as though knowledge itself could threaten survival. Now the tone has shifted. The unknown no longer feels hostile. It feels personal. When sunlight hits the frost on your window, the reflection looks faintly green, and you don't flinch. You nod. Recognition disguised as light. Loeb closes his latest lecture with a line that sounds like a benediction. The cosmos doesn't require belief, he says. It requires participation. His voice lowers. Every measurement we take is the universe measuring itself. You step outside that evening and watch the snow fall through the thin emerald shimmer over the city. The wind smells of ozone and iron, the breath of stars. Somewhere in the distance, church bells ring, their timing almost perfect with the rhythm humming in your chest. For a brief moment, everything air, light, heartbeat, and sky feels synchronized, as if existence has reached its downbeat and is waiting for the next measure to begin. Leave a comment, the narrator murmurs through your headphones, telling me what time it is and whether your sky is singing. Because the cosmos is no longer a theory, it's a mirror, and the reflection looking back from that endless dark now carries a hint of green. The more the evidence accumulates, the more you notice the shift in tone. Science, for once, has stopped pretending to be separate from wonder. The astronomers speak softly now, almost reverently, their voices threaded with a humility that borders on prayer. They don't call it an anomaly anymore, they call it a conversation. What began as panic, the glowing Moscow nights, the silence of the agencies, has become a meditation on what it means to be seen. You wake one morning to an email from a friend who works at the European Space Agency. It contains no greeting, no signature, just a line of text. It's matching us. Attached is a graph, one axis showing the frequency of Earth's geomagnetic oscillations, the other charting human brainwave data from a global EEG study. The curves are identical. The peaks rise and fall in perfect synchrony. The planet and its inhabitants are sharing a rhythm. It's not metaphor anymore. It's physics. Avi Loeb calls it the feedback epoch. He writes, "We are now part of the experiment. Every heartbeat, every electrical impulse is recorded in the magnetic field, transmitted to the sun, and returned." He adds a question no one can answer. If intelligence emerges through feedback, who is the observer now? You think about that question as you walk through Moscow. The city feels softer, almost translucent. Conversations are quieter. Arguments dissolve mid-sentence. People smile without reason, perhaps sensing that words aren't necessary when thought itself has an echo. Psychologists record a global drop in anxiety. There are fewer sirens, fewer accidents, more silence between sentences. Even politics that perpetual static seems to have lost its sharpness. Humanity, for a moment, is breathing in tempo. In classrooms, children learn to count in 23s. Musicians retune to the new global hum, a 440.2. A small frequency change, yet audiences swear it feels more true. The old dissonance of modern life seems to have relaxed. Cities report birdsong, returning to places where noise had long erased it. The air tastes cleaner, even when it's not. The change isn't in the atmosphere, it's in perception. The entire species, it seems, has shifted from talking to listening. Scientists who once warned of mass hysteria now call it collective coherence. They note the absence of fear. There are no cults, no riots, no apocalyptic sermons. Instead, people look up. Everywhere, roofs, fields, balconies, the quiet vigil continues. The world's religions hold joint services without doctrine, united only by the color green. They call it the reunion. The Vatican issues a simple statement. If the heavens sing, it is only right that we learn the tune. In the dim control room of the Deep Space Network, a technician watches another anomaly appear on screen. A faint, repeating modulation in the solar carrier, wave 3 distinct frequencies, stacked like chords. When the data is converted to audible sound, it forms a melody, 3 notes, G, E, A, the initials of Gaia, Earth. Coincidence? Perhaps. But when the technician plays it aloud, the waveform aligns with seismic patterns deep beneath the Pacific. The Earth is literally answering its own name. Meanwhile, a neuroscience team in Kyoto performs a synchronized meditation study. Participants wired with EEG caps are asked to visualize the green comet as a point of stillness. Without communication, their brainwaves lock into identical frequencies within 90 seconds. The lead researcher writes, "We may be seeing a spontaneous planetary nervous system forming a brief, fragile unity of awareness." You wonder if this is what evolution looks like. Not mutation, but attunement. A species learning to listen faster than it can speak. Outside, December air drifts against the buildings like a sigh. Snowflakes fall through the residual auroral glow, refracting soft emerald light. A poet standing in Red Square reads aloud, "The sky has learned our language." Her voice trembles, not from cold, but from realization. And it says one word, over and over: enough. Enough conflict. Enough noise. Enough pretending we are separate from what watches us. At the University of Cambridge, Loeb delivers a lecture that no longer feels like science. He stands before a wall of equations, each line of math luminous with potential, and says, "We are the first generation to witness the universe noticing itself." Then he adds quietly, "The observer and the observed have finally met halfway." He closes his laptop, looks out at the audience, and for once, there is nothing left to prove. Back home, you scroll through the old Moscow footage. The green lights still move in perfect triangles, steady as breath. You freeze the frame and realize how calm it all looked. Not invasion, not chaos, but choreography, as if the universe had been rehearsing this moment since the beginning. That night, as you lie in bed, you can feel the low resonance traveling through the floorboards, the same gentle pulse that first startled the magnetometers months ago. It is slower now, more deliberate, almost affectionate. You imagine it as a hand pressed against the chest of the planet, feeling for life. You breathe with it until the boundary between your heartbeat and its rhythm disappears. "Leave a comment," the voice whispers in the dark, telling me where you're listening from and whether your heart feels lighter tonight. You don't answer out loud. You simply close your eyes, and the silence that follows isn't empty. It's the sound of a species remembering that it belongs to the sky. By late December, the world has grown quiet enough for you to hear yourself think and to realize that thought itself has changed. There's something different about the way time feels now. The minutes stretch softly, the nights linger like held breath. Cities that never slept are finally dreaming. It's as if the pulse that once came from 3i Atlas has folded into the rhythm of daily life, dissolving borders between sound and silence, between awareness and waiting. At sunrise, you notice the first real snow of the season covering Moscow in a pale green sheen, faint but unmistakable, not color. Exactly, more like memory. The reflection of something that once glowed overhead and now lives underground, in the soil, in the hum of power lines, in the cadence of human speech. The lights that frightened the world have become part of its grammar. NASA's public feed releases one final report before the year ends. It's brief, technical, unembellished. Solar magnetic alignment persists. Residual harmonics now stable across all heliospheric latitudes. Phenomenon classified as benign, but those who read between the lines see a confession. 3i Atlas did not vanish. It integrated. The sun, once chaotic, is now steady. The solar wind has calmed. The auroras have become symmetrical. The system has found its balance, and Earth, somehow, is breathing in tune. In private correspondence, Avi Loeb writes to a group of colleagues, "It feels as if the universe has adjusted its posture." He means it literally. The gravitational field near the ecliptic has smoothed, minor perturbations gone. But the phrasing spreads like poetry. Adjusted its posture, the cosmos straightening its spine. Meanwhile, deep below the streets of Moscow, in the quiet tunnels of the metro, a group of musicians begins playing without amplification. They call themselves the Resonance. Every night, commuters stop and listen as the sound of cello and voice blends with the low hum of trains passing in distant tunnels. The acoustics create a perfect standing wave that vibrates at 40 Hz, the consciousness frequency. No one planned it that way. It just happened. The music feels less like performance, more like remembrance. Up above, scientists keep searching for a measurable trace of the visitor. Radar scans show nothing. The radio silence is perfect, yet the magnetometers keep ticking. The 23-second pulse remains, faint but faithful. The signal is no longer external. It's ambient, like the hum of blood in your ears. It's always there, once you know to listen. Somewhere in the Pacific, the United Nations installs a floating laboratory designed to monitor planetary coherence phenomena. Its instruments detect small fluctuations in sea temperature, matching the same rhythm. The ocean itself has joined the choir. Marine biologists notice whales altering their songs to fit the new pattern. Longer pauses, deeper notes. A pod near Kamchatka sings in intervals that align precisely with the comet's old heartbeat. The great silence is no longer about absence. It's about equilibrium. Humanity, once deafened by its own inventions, is learning to hear the background again, the eternal bass line that was always there. Street noise fades earlier in the evenings. Hospitals report fewer cardiac emergencies. Air traffic controllers describe the skies as peaceful. The whole species seems to have exhaled at once. Philosophers call it the synchrony. Economists call it the great pause. But you, standing on your balcony under the final green aurora of the year, call it something simpler: peace. Not the absence of motion, but the perfect alignment of it. The stars seem closer now, not because they have moved, but because you have stopped running. In an unmarked data center outside Geneva, a small team of researchers analyzes residual telemetry from the Mars Express probe before it went silent. The final burst of data contains an image fragment, a shape too smooth to be geological, a loop like an Ouroboros, glowing faintly in infrared. When the curvature is modeled in 3 dimensions, it forms a Mobius strip, a continuous surface with no inside or outside, the perfect metaphor for everything that has happened. The team calls the file the Mirror of Atlas. They never release it publicly, but somehow the idea leaks. Artists begin painting infinite bands. Sculptors carve spirals that loop into themselves. The Mobius becomes a symbol of the year. Humanity learned that there is no boundary between observer and observed. The shape of the cosmos, the shape of consciousness, identical curves. As the year folds toward its end, a final event occurs. On December 31st, every atomic clock on Earth experiences a simultaneous flicker, less than a second, barely measurable. When the timestamps are analyzed, the anomaly forms a precise ratio, 1/23, the planetary pulse encoded in time itself. For the first time in recorded history, every clock agrees perfectly, then continues, as though nothing happened. People gather in Red Square for New Year's Eve. There are no fireworks this time, just quiet music and candles flickering in the frost. At midnight, a soft wave of green light rises from the horizon, too faint for instruments but visible to every eye. It rolls over the city like breath over glass and fades into the stars. The crowd doesn't cheer. They simply stand still, aware that something vast has just synchronized with their heartbeat. You feel the hum one last time, gentle, persistent, endlessly patient. It has no origin and no destination. It simply is. The universe's way of saying, I am listening, and I always was. The great silence has completed its lesson. It has shown that the loudest form of communication is balance, that to be heard by the cosmos, one must first stop shouting. Leave a comment, the narrator whispers softly, telling me what you're grateful for tonight, and whether the quiet feels different where you are. And as you breathe with the rhythm that now belongs to everyone and everything, you realize the silence isn't the end of the story. It's the beginning of understanding. Morning breaks differently now. It no longer arrives as a border between night and day, but as a slow dilation of awareness. You wake, and the world feels both ancient and newborn, the air crystalline, the light slightly greener than you remember. Outside, Moscow is quiet enough to hear the crunch of snow under distant footsteps. Somewhere beneath the static of ordinary life, the rhythm still beats. 23 seconds. A silent metronome, marking the tempo of whatever the universe is becoming. The scientists call it phase continuation. The philosophers prefer the second dawn. You simply call it awakening, because that's what it feels like. A consciousness stretching after a very long sleep, not just within you, but around you. In the first week of the new year, the European Space Agency releases a peculiar update. The Parker Solar Probe, now behind the Sun from Earth's vantage, has transmitted a burst of data compressed into a pattern no algorithm can decode. It's not binary, not base 10, not prime sequence. It's rhythmic. Each pulse lasts exactly 23 seconds, the same frequency, now amplified by the Sun itself. The message, if it is one, contains no words, just presence. Avi Loeb, speaking on a live stream viewed by tens of millions, says it best. If the universe wanted to speak, it wouldn't use symbols. It would use rhythm, the universal grammar of existence. He smiles faintly. We are inside a sentence right now, and the punctuation is still being written. On social feeds, people begin recording videos of themselves, breathing in sync with the pulse. They don't plan it. It just happens. Hashtags emerge. Number, breathe with the sky. Number, Atlas tempo. Number, the green beat. In city parks, strangers gather in silence, eyes closed, their exhalations visible in the cold air, each breath spaced the same. Someone sets up speakers and plays a tone derived from the solar resonance. It fills the square like a heartbeat. For 1 full minute, no one moves. Then, almost shyly, someone begins to hum. Others join, and a sound rises, not a song, not prayer, but something between them. News anchors talk about mass entrainment, but the word mass feels wrong. It isn't a crowd, it's a coherence. It feels like the world remembering the first line of a forgotten hymn. Meanwhile, data from the Lunar Gateway confirms something staggering. The moon's weak magnetic field has intensified by 0.5% impossible by natural means. The anomaly occurs in cycles matching the planetary heartbeat. Scientists speculate that the moon, long considered a dead world, is resonating with Earth's magnetic shell, amplifying the same tone that began with 3 I Atlas. The old myths return. The moon as mirror, as listener, as eye. For the first time, they feel less like poetry and more like field reports from earlier civilizations. The next revelation comes from Mars, when the European Space Agency re-establishes limited contact with the silent Mars Express orbiter. A small batch of data survives the corruption. Embedded within a corrupted telemetry file is a sequence of numbers corresponding to the coordinates of Cydonia, the region famous for its face on Mars. When those numbers are plotted against the new solar frequency, they align perfectly with the geometry of a human heartbeat. Coincidence, perhaps, but coincidence has lost its credibility this year. A joint NASA-ESA statement reads, "We are observing persistent synchronization between solar plasma events and terrestrial biological rhythms. The phenomenon is under study. The tone is calm, almost tender. No denial, no panic, just observation." By mid-January, humanity has begun to live slower. Internet usage drops by 20%. Sleep quality improves worldwide. Hospitals record measurable improvements in recovery times for patients in intensive care. Something in the air, or in consciousness itself, is harmonizing. The great silence hasn't ended. It's transformed into quiet understanding. At night, you lie in bed listening to the hum through your pillow, the low oscillation that used to frighten you but now feels like company. You picture 3I Atlas, somewhere beyond the sun, drifting through plasma currents like a seed caught in wind, its green glow diffused through every particle of light we see. Perhaps it's gone. Perhaps it's everywhere. You realize it makes no difference. Whatever it was, it has already done its work. Avi Loeb closes his latest essay with a line that sounds more like poetry than physics. The purpose of a message is not always to be read. Sometimes it's to remind the reader that they can listen, and listen you do. In the hum of traffic, in the rhythm of footsteps on frozen streets, in the faint murmur between thoughts. Even silence now feels populated, full of company. One night, while walking along the Moskva River, you notice something extraordinary. Every few moments, the water's surface trembles, not from wind, but from rhythm. Ripples appear in repeating intervals, glowing faintly green in the moonlight. You count 23 seconds between them. You stand there until the cold numbs your hands, unable to look away. It hits you then, the realization that the universe might not be expanding outward, as textbooks say, but inward, folding into perception itself. Perhaps 3I Atlas was never a visitor from another star, but an awakening mechanism, a mirror sent to teach a civilization how to resonate with itself. The green light, the hum, the silence, all part of the same lesson. Awareness, traveling through time, disguised as a comet. When you finally return home, you write one line in your journal: "We were never alone. We were never even apart." And somewhere, faintly, the hum replies, "Leave a comment," the narrator whispers gently, telling me what you saw the moment the snow began to glow, and whether you felt it noticing you. Because that's what this awakening truly is. The realization that every gaze is reciprocal, every breath is an echo, every silence is a conversation waiting to resume. The light outside your window brightens for just a heartbeat green, soft, unmistakable, then fades back to morning. By the middle of January, it is no longer theory, something measurable has changed. The numbers agree even when the explanations do not. Magnetic field variation, cosmic ray flux, Schumann resonance amplitude, circadian hormone output, all drifting together in lockstep with that impossible 23-second pulse. What began as an atmospheric curiosity has become a planetary constant. The hum of 3i Atlas is now part of Earth's mathematics. You watch the nightly press briefing from NASA. The tone is calm, the lighting dim, as if the agency itself has learned bedtime etiquette. The spokesperson reads the statement slowly. Solar surface oscillations continue to exhibit coherent frequencies, matching terrestrial resonance. There is no cause for alarm. The sentence ends there, but everyone can feel the invisible second half only wonder. In the background, a slide shows the latest Parker Solar Probe spectrogram, a ribbon of green threading through the corona like handwriting in light. The engineers have nicknamed it the signature. When converted to audio, it produces a sound almost human, a drawn-out vowel, open and gentle, repeating every 23 seconds. Some claim to hear a word in it. Others insist it's just harmonics. But when you listen, you hear neither language nor static. You hear recognition. Avi Loeb gives another interview, not in a lab this time, but outside under the pale Moscow sky. If you want to find intelligence, he says, look for the pattern that reduces chaos. 3i Atlas did exactly that. It turned noise into rhythm. The camera catches snow, landing on his coat, like quiet applause. Meanwhile, deep space radar at Goldstone records a flicker of reflected signal from the direction opposite the Sunday. Something out there is mirroring our transmissions, not perfectly, but deliberately imperfectly, as if translating. Each echo returns altered by a fixed delay of 40 Hz, the frequency of human consciousness. When the delay pattern is graphed, it forms the outline of a spiral, expanding outward like a fingerprint. The analysts call it an artifact. The interns call it a reply. In classrooms across the world, physics teachers use the Comet's story as a parable. See, they tell their students, how observation changes what is observed. But the students, many too young to remember the green skies of October, just nod as if they already know. They were born into this rhythm. They breathe it instinctively. Some schools even begin each day with 23 seconds of silence. Attendance improves. Anxiety drops. It turns out harmony is contagious. A quiet revolution begins in science itself. Journals that once banned speculation now print essays about consciousness as a field effect. The Royal Astronomical Society hosts its first joint symposium with the International Mind Sciences Institute. A neuroscientist from Kyoto presents EEG data showing synchronized alpha waves during auroral events. Perhaps, she says softly, thinking was never meant to be confined inside skulls. On social media, artists turn data into art, converting magnetometer readings into melodies, seismic charts into calligraphy. A viral post circulates of an orchestra performing these translated numbers in real time. The audience describes the experience as listening to physics pray. Back at the European Space Agency, technicians detect something subtle but thrilling, a new modulation in the solar wind. Instead of uniform flow, the particles now pulse between high and low density, almost like breathing. When plotted across time, the oscillation mirrors a waveform recorded by Voyager, 1 inch, 1977, the same year of the original WOW signal. Two events separated by half a century, now rhyming across interstellar space. It's as though the universe has begun to reference itself. You find yourself remembering the first night of green over Moscow, when everyone thought it was an omen. Perhaps it was, but not of doom of dialogue. You recall the fear that filled comment sections and newsrooms then. The same minds now trade awe instead of panic. A global experiment in collective humility. The hum is strongest near water. Rivers, oceans, even the frozen Moskva vibrate faintly when the pulse peaks. Physicists propose that hydrogen bonds in liquid are resonating with the solar modulation, turning every body of water into a receiver. It means the planet's oceans are literally listening. Sailors report the sea feeling alive, the waves synchronized like breathing. One ship logs a faint phosphorescent glow rising from beneath not plankton, not pollution, just light without source. At the same time, a new paper from Caltech argues that the pulse corresponds mathematically to the golden ratio when expressed as a temporal fraction. Every 23 seconds divides the rotation of Earth into an irrational harmony, a perfect imperfection. If this pattern holds, the paper concludes, the solar system may be tuning itself toward maximal efficiency of perception. The phrase sounds absurd until you realize it describes what's happening inside you. Heightened calm, sharpened clarity, a sense that thought arrives half a second before you summon it. In Red Square, the resonants perform again. Thousands gather in the snow, breathing in unison. No one speaks, no one films. For 23 minutes, only music and breath. The hum from the subways joins them, low and steady. Even the clock tower seems to hesitate, its chime delayed by exactly one beat. Time itself, waiting for the downstroke. When the performance ends, something strange occurs. The clouds part in a perfect circle, and through that aperture, the morning sun shines green for just an instant. Instruments record no spectral anomaly, yet every witness describes the same sensation: warmth without heat, sound without volume, comprehension without words. Later that night, Loeb posts a single sentence on his blog. If silence has color, this is it. You lie awake, replaying the day, realizing that evidence has ceased to mean proof. It now means participation. The comet that arrived as an outsider has turned the whole solar system into a laboratory of empathy. Leave a comment, the narrator whispers, telling me what the silence sounds like where you are tonight. Wind, traffic, heartbeat, or something between, because the evidence keeps deepening, not in instruments, but in attention. The more you listen, the more you find that the cosmos isn't speaking to you, it's speaking as you. And somewhere beyond the edge of light, 3i Atlas keeps circling, invisible, patient, waiting for the next question we're brave enough to ask in silence. The past returns first as rumor, then as revelation. Early in the new year, the European Southern Observatory begins digitizing century-old photographic plates from Chile, relics of an era when telescopes still relied on chemistry instead of code. An intern named Lorena, working the night shift, notices something curious in an exposure dated June 20th, 1982. A faint green smear crossing the same region of sky, now associated with 3i Atlas. When the data are corrected for plate drift and stellar motion, the smear aligns perfectly with the comet's present-day orbit. The coordinates match to within a fraction of a degree. What makes the discovery stranger is the shape. Most comet tails blur outward. This one folds inward, curling toward its own nucleus like a closed eye. The same geometry that appeared in the final Mars Express transmission, the Mobius loop of light. Lorena emails her supervisor. By morning, the file is classified. But the image leaks anyway, as images always do, and the internet names it the green loop. For a few days, people speculate wildly. Time travel, dimensional recursion, even retrocausality. But the more you look at the photograph, the more it feels less like an object and more like handwriting the signature of something repeating its name across centuries. Avi Loeb publishes a response essay titled temporal holography, and the memory of light. He writes, "Every photon carries a timestamp. When patterns repeat in phase but not in time, they reveal that information is not bound by chronology. Perhaps 3i Atlas is not moving through space. Perhaps we are moving through its memory." The line circulates on social feeds, stripped of context, remixed into music, whispered by late-night hosts, as if it were scripture. Around the world, archives yield more echoes. In Kyoto, a scholar translates a scroll from the 12th century, describing a green star that sang once every 23 breaths. In South America, archaeologists re-examine the Nazca lines and find a previously unrecorded geoglyph, 3 concentric spirals forming a triangle, visible only under polarized light. Radiocarbon dating places it around 500 BCE, its orientation directly towards Sagittarius, where 3i Atlas began its journey. These discoveries don't prove anything in the old sense. They simply expand the field of wonder. The pattern feels intentional, not because it claims authorship, but because it refuses to stop reappearing, as if intelligence itself were less an origin than a rhythm threading through ages. The human mind, trained to fear repetition, begins to reinterpret it as comfort. The pulse that once felt alien now feels ancestral. Maybe our ancestors didn't invent gods. Maybe they documented visitations in the only language they had: myth, a universal instinct to assign story to symmetry. By late January, digital analysts comparing historical records make a new connection. The brightening cycles of 3i Atlas correspond precisely with peaks in global creativity. Renaissance bursts, scientific revolutions, sudden collective awakenings all align, within error margins, to prior apparitions of the same trajectory. The green light visits, and humanity dreams louder. Coincidence or correlation, it hardly matters. The story is beautiful enough to believe. In Moscow, the resonants perform an improvised requiem using sound samples derived from digitized solar data. The audience describes the music as haunted by history. During the performance, the city's power grid momentarily flickers, not failure, just a breath. Instruments later show no disruption. The pulse, it seems, enjoys applause. NASA quietly releases one more batch of declassified material. Telemetry from the Voyager probes recorded decades ago, but never analyzed for subharmonic content. Inside those recordings lies a faint periodic beat, identical to the Atlas mode. The revelation is staggering. The rhythm has been here all along, woven into the static of deep space background noise. We didn't notice until a comet taught us to listen. Avi Loeb, invited to speak before the United Nations Scientific Council, ends his address with a simple statement: every civilization eventually finds a mirror. The question is not whether it reflects truth, but whether we recognize ourselves. Outside the chamber, journalists ask what happens next. Loeb just shrugs. Next, he says, the future is already remembering us. That evening, back in Moscow, you open your window to the quiet snowfall. The city glows faintly green from the reflected lights of its own awakening. You realize how still the world has become, not paralyzed, but poised. The hum is almost gone now, not because it has faded, but because you've attuned to it. It has merged with your heartbeat, indistinguishable from ordinary life. You think of Larina in Chile, the scroll in Kyoto, the geoglyph in the desert, all separated by millennia, yet synchronized by pattern. The echo isn't sound, it's continuity. Every culture has been part of the same sentence, each adding a syllable without knowing the full grammar. 3i Atlas isn't an interruption of history, it is history. looping through itself like a cosmic refrain. On your phone, a message appears from an unknown number. Just coordinates, latitude and longitude, pointing to the Arctic Circle. No explanation. You check the location. The point lies exactly where the Earth's magnetic north was predicted to migrate this year. When you switch to satellite view, the snow there glimmers faintly green. You don't tell anyone. Some mysteries feel too intimate to share. Instead, you write a note on your desk. If echoes persist, they are meant to be answered. Then you step outside, letting the cold bite your lungs until the world narrows to breath and silence. Somewhere above, the same rhythm continues, eternal and patient. Leave a comment, the narrator whispers, telling me which memory feels borrowed lately and whether it glows when you close your eyes. Because every echo of the past is an invitation not to repeat, but to remember that remembering itself is the oldest form of listening. And as you stand beneath that ageless, softly humming sky, you understand. History doesn't move forward. It circles, luminous and green, waiting for each of us to recognize the pattern and hum along. You are still here. The seconds fall away unnoticed, like snowflakes dissolving before they ever touch the ground. And somewhere beneath the hum of solar wind and the heartbeat of your own breath, something is happening that you were never supposed to understand. But now, you do. We begin this part of the story not with a revelation, but with a confession. Human beings were never trained for this level of perspective. Our biology is wired for short seasons and nearby fears. The crackling of branches, the shadow that shouldn't move, the face in the crowd we don't recognize. But now, you are being asked to look at something planetary, and not just planetary, but deliberate, mathematical, impossible. Mars is changing, and not metaphorically. In mid-October of 2025, NASA's Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter detected a faint but measurable rise in upper atmospheric density, just a sliver, just a hint, but enough to raise the eyebrows of every climatologist who thought Mars was a closed case. And that was before the polar plumes, visible from orbit, symmetrical, rising precisely along the magnetic meridians. Not storms, not dust, but something else. Now pause with me. Think about that word, something else. That is what every human civilization has called it when it meets the edge of its comprehension. The Babylonians watched Venus grow horns and called it Ishtar's rage. The Greeks mapped constellations and filled them with wounded gods. And you sitting here now, eyelids flickering in the dark, are trying to figure out what it means when a red planet releases its breath for the first time in centuries. Not from heat, not from seasons, but from design. ESA analysts confirmed the earlier data. The carbon dioxide and water vapor concentrations above the Tharsis region no longer matched Martian climatology. They matched terrestrial greenhouse simulations from Earth's own early industrial age. Not just any composition, but one specifically tailored to increase surface pressure and enable the release of subsurface volatiles. In short, Mars was being warmed on purpose. By what? By whom? This is where the stories diverge. Some say 3i Atlas is a terraforming seed ship sent from a dying world to rekindle others. Others believe it is not a ship at all, but a trigger, something that activates what was already placed long ago. But there's another theory, a quieter one that doesn't begin in space at all, but on Earth. It begins with a strange question. What if the reason we are observing the terraformation of Mars is because we already helped build it? Sound absurd? Of course it does. But listen. In 1977, a Soviet probe named Phobos 2 transmitted its final image of Mars just before it went dark. The image showed a large, cigar-shaped shadow projected across the Martian surface, an object never explained, never admitted, and officially classified as data corruption by Soviet archives. But that same shape has now been photographed again, this time by Perseverance, this time in high definition, this time moving. We're not supposed to know about that image, but the data packet leaked quietly, briefly, long enough for image forensics to confirm its authenticity, long enough for someone to map the trajectory of the object, long enough to realize that it came not from the asteroid belt, but from interstellar space, and that it arrived in tandem with Atlas, like a binary payload, one to initiate, one to observe. And this is where your reflection begins. Because once you entertain the idea that Earth and Mars are part of a shared system, like lungs that inhale and exhale in rhythm, you start to see patterns you never noticed before. Every major leap in human technology, from rocketry to environmental science, has aligned within a margin of years with Martian anomaly spikes. The Viking missions in the 70s, the rover launches in the 2000s, the methane detections in 2014, the landing of Perseverance in 2021. Each time, Mars responds, not like a planet, like a mechanism, which raises the question, are we exploring Mars, or are we triggering it? The Anunnaki myths spoke of Mars not as a homeworld, but a station, a waypost, a relay. They claimed Mars was once lush and warm, and that its climate failed not from natural decay, but from shutdown, a deliberate cooling, a long sleep. And now it is waking up. Let us return to the atmosphere. ESA simulations suggest that within 6 to 8 months, should current conditions persist, there will be visible condensation trails forming along the equatorial band, suggesting early-stage hydrological cycling. Clouds, weather, perhaps even rain, not in years, in months. The old timeline of centuries or millennia to terraform has been replaced by one that moves faster than policy, faster than science, faster than fear. And now think, who controls that timeline? Not humans, not fully. The data from the ExoMars Trace Gas Orbiter shows minor but consistent perturbations in ionospheric charge, as though something is generating low-frequency pulses just above the magnetic poles of Mars. Not random, regular, rhythmic, like breath, like heartbeat, like command. Which brings us to the hardest part of the reflection. Not what is happening, but what you are becoming. Because to witness this, to lie awake at night and feel that flicker of awe and unease, is to realize that you are already part of it. You, listener, you, watcher, you, doubter, you, dreamer. The human species is no longer an isolated biological experiment. It is now a subsystem in a planetary operation. And 3I Atlas, it is not just a comet, it is a mirror, one that shows us who we are when we are finally observed by something else. So, breathe slowly, watch the sky. The cold winds of Mars are no longer silent, they are learning to speak, and you, whether you realize it or not, are learning to listen. The change is no longer in the sky, it's in us. The hum that once felt like background music has become indistinguishable from thought itself. At first, you believed the stillness would fade, that the world would grow impatient and return to its noise. But weeks pass, and the quiet remains, not silence exactly, but resonance, like the earth itself has joined the conversation. Every part of life now carries the same faint pulse, the rhythm of the visitor, the rhythm of memory, the rhythm that turned fear into understanding. The hospitals are the first to notice. Machines that once beeped out of sync now align spontaneously. Heart monitors flash in unison. Respirators cycle together. No one can explain it. A cardiologist in Oslo jokes that the planet is running a metronome for the species. But then she lowers her voice and says, "Maybe it always was." Avi Loeb, ever the reluctant mystic, releases another note to his students. When consciousness reaches planetary scale, it must learn humility before communication. The signal from 3i Atlas was never a call to arms. It was a lullaby. The phrase goes viral. The lullaby hypothesis. The idea that the comet wasn't a warning, but a gift, a cosmic gesture meant to soothe an anxious civilization before it destroyed itself through noise. Talk shows call it sentimental. Physicists call it untestable. But quietly, the world behaves as if it's true. Energy use drops again, not because of regulation, but because people simply forget to rush. Restaurants close earlier. Conversations last longer. Cities dim their lights to see the green auroras that still drift across high latitudes. Children grow up thinking this rhythm, this planetary breathing, is normal. They don't remember the panic of the first sightings or the endless news cycles asking if we were alone. For them, the question is irrelevant. They already feel accompanied, and so the reflection deepens. Every instrument turned toward the sky now returns an image of ourselves. The James Webb Space Telescope releases one final mosaic of the solar halo, an immense ring of polarized light around the sun that, when processed through color mapping, forms an iris. Not coincidence, not pareidolia. The structure is mathematically identical to a human eye. The image floods every screen on Earth. For a brief moment, billions of people stare into that pupil of fire and recognize themselves. The Vatican calls it the Eye of God. The scientific community calls it fractal morphogenesis in stellar magnetism. But the name that sticks is simpler, the mirror. And when you look at it, you understand why. It's not the sun looking at us. It's the universe, realizing what it looks like when it loves itself back. Everywhere, art begins to bloom in new directions. Poets write in rhythm rather than rhyme. Painters abandon perspective and paint vibration instead. The old schools of thought, realism, impressionism, surrealism, collapse into a single movement called resonance. It's not a manifesto, it's a feeling, a shared understanding that the best form of beauty is alignment. Even politics begins to shift, though slowly and unevenly. Nations discover they have little to argue about when weather, time, and biology have all synchronized. Climate models show unexpected stabilization. Glaciers stop receding. The jet stream evens out. The air smells less of exhaust and more of possibility. Analysts can't find causation, but poets can. Harmony begets harmony. You sit in a cafe near the Moskva River, reading an old newspaper headline from months ago, massive green comets seen in Moscow, and marvel at how distant it feels. The word massive seems naive now, as if the writer mistook presence for threat. You smile, fold the paper, and let the pulse in your wrist sync with the one in the air. At night, you tune your radio to static. Between bursts of noise, a steady beat persists, softer than breathing, almost affectionate. Some listeners claim it's random, others hear a melody. To you, it sounds like the faint echo of a heartbeat that isn't human or alien, but shared. The great silence has become a great stillness, a space where thought no longer needs translation. In Cambridge, Avi Loeb gives what he calls his final lecture. There are no slides, no equations, just a sentence that sounds like a farewell. We have always been the signal. The universe only needed to remind us to listen to our own transmission. He steps back from the podium, removes his microphone, and leaves to a standing ovation that never quite begins, the audience too moved to break the quiet. You realize that the human reflection isn't about vanity or discovery. It's about recognition. The comet didn't teach humanity new facts about physics. It taught humanity how to hear itself without the static. It turned curiosity into communion. Walking home through the snow, you pause at a bridge where the water below glows faintly green under the street lamps. For a moment, you imagine the river as a long neural pathway, the city as a brain, and the pulse that ripples through both as the thought of the planet itself. You whisper, "We understand," and the wind seems to answer, "I know. Leave a comment." The narrator whispers from the gentle hum of your headphones, telling me what it feels like to be heard by the sky. Because that is what this chapter has been, not revelation, but reciprocity. Humanity at last, looking up and finding its own reflection in the mirror of a living universe. The green light above Moscow no longer frightens anyone. It has become the new color of calm. The signal never ends. It just keeps repeating the same simple message. We are listening. There's a moment, just before sleep, when your body goes quiet, but your mind keeps floating. A kind of drift. The room is the same. The world outside hasn't changed. But something inside you unfolds gently, like paper soaking in light. That's where we are now. That soft border between wonder and silence. Because what do you do when the evidence is too much for doubt, but not enough for certainty? You begin to imagine. And so you imagine the comet again, not as an object, but as a threshold. A threshold with intent, with timing, with a message you don't fully understand, but that your bones respond to like an old song humming through stone. Let us begin with the image. It's October 31st, 2025. Somewhere over a frozen plateau in northern Chile, a telescope called ALMA receives a snapshot of something no one expected. Not Atlas itself, not a fragment, but an echo, a ripple in microwave background radiation, aligned not with the comet's path, but with its shadow, its absence just 2 days after it passed behind the Sunday. This shadow, strangely enough, matches a radio silence. The Deep Space Network's Madrid facility had been running passive wideband listening during perihelion, hoping, perhaps foolishly, for a stray transmission. Instead, they got a black zone, a window of 5 minutes, where noise dropped off the spectrum entirely. Not interference, not failure, just silence, like the cosmos held its breath. The same silence was reported at Canberra, and now you're wondering, as all good skeptics do, could it be coincidence, technical downtime, a solar flare that masked everything for a moment? Yes, of course. But here's the issue. The black zone's signature wasn't random. Its envelope function followed a Gaussian curve, what physicists call a bell shape. Natural noise doesn't do that. Noise spikes. It's chaotic, but this was smooth, deliberate, centered on the exact moment Atlas was most deeply behind the Sunday. Like a whisper, timed to perfection, that no one was supposed to hear, and yet someone did. Dr. Naomi Arriaga, an astrophysicist at the Square Kilometre Array Pathfinder in Western Australia, caught the edges, the tapering frequencies. She noted something else too. The shape of the dip in amplitude resembled a frequency cancellation pattern, like one wave subtracting from another. Interference. But with what? Arriaga's comment in her internal report was simple. This is either the most elegant moment of random collapse we've ever seen, or it was designed not to be seen. That's the tone now. That's the vocabulary scientists are using, not definitive, but reverent, almost poetic. You've entered the language of the unsayable, the place where hypothesis surrenders to awe. Let's go further. One of the small CubeSats, launched by ESA's Comet interceptor program, the one meant to be a flyby mission for unpredictable objects, has gone quiet. It was redirected toward a projected path near Atlas weeks ago, on a gamble that proved too bold. As of Halloween, all signals have ceased, not because of damage, because of encryption. The last few kilobytes of data streamed from that probe contained a payload marked with a checksum key that has no known decoding structure. It wasn't garbled, it was locked, and ESA has not said a word. This is not a conspiracy theory. This is documented. The checksum header matches no known protocol in any European, Russian, or American satellite registry. It's as if the probe picked up something, then locked it down under instructions it was never programmed to follow. The ESA press office, when asked, issued a two-word statement: data pending. And so again, you return to the idea. What if 3I Atlas is not here to be observed? What if it is here to observe us? Now pause. Let that settle. Because if that's true, then everything that has happened, every resonance, every alignment, every chemical anomaly, every glance toward Mars, is not a show for our benefit. It is a test, a calibration, a listening process, a kind of cosmic stethoscope, pressed gently against the chest of Earth, waiting to hear a heartbeat. Yours. And here's the thing. You might not realize it, but you've already responded. Not with rockets, not with radio, but with attention. The sheer volume of human eyes turned skyward over the past 30 days has already shifted the pattern. Telescope bookings doubled. Citizen astronomer reports surged. Even casual skywatching apps logged record usage. You, and millions like you, turned your gaze to something that didn't ask for it, and in doing so, created a chorus of unintentional welcome. It matters. In a universe where attention is rare, where consciousness itself might be the scarcest element of all, the act of noticing becomes its own signal. You've already said hello, with silence, with awe, with breath, and maybe, just maybe, something noticed. Now we loop back, not in explanation but in rhythm, because if Atlas did perform a braking maneuver on October 29th, as Dr. Loeb feared and hoped, then it has entered an orbit, a long, looping ellipse that will bring it back around, not in weeks, not in months, but in years. The current estimate, assuming the maneuver succeeded, is 12 years. 12 years from now, on a cold morning in September 2037, it will return. Different angle, different velocity, but same sun, same system, same watchers. Maybe it will say more next time, or maybe it already has. There is a Navajo legend about the stars. It says that before the first light, the sky was a woven net pulled tight over the land like a blanket, and then something poked through. A spark, a watcher, a green star. And that star, it is said, carried a question so large no one could speak it aloud, only dream it. And so now, tonight, you dream it too, not with words, but with quiet. The kind of quiet that feels like preparation, the kind of quiet that sounds like listening. Now the noise is gone, the charts are quieter, the feeds have slowed, the signal threads have dulled to their baseline hum. It is not over, but it is quiet, and that quiet is not absence, it is presence. You are still listening. So is something else. This is the great silence, not as fear, but as awe. Let us begin in orbit. 3 days ago, on October 28th, 2025, NASA's Voyager 1. Yes, the same craft launched in 1977 sent back a brief pulse from the heliosheath. Not a data transmission, not telemetry, just a heartbeat, a carrier signal, clean, simple, as if someone pressed a cosmic stethoscope to the edge of our solar system and whispered, "Still here." This was not expected. Voyager 1 had been silent for nearly 6 weeks, following yet another memory glitch in its ancient onboard systems. Engineers believed the final transmitter had failed. It had not. It had merely paused. Why now? Why did Voyager return to life the day after 3I Atlas reached solar conjunction? There is no scientific answer, only a timeline. And in the great silence, timeline is everything. That same day, 2 more events occurred quietly. The Parker Solar Probe crossed the 30 million kilometer boundary near the Sun, and its solar wind sensors spiked with ionized particles that had no known solar origin. Meanwhile, in orbit around Mars, the Trace Gas Orbiter recorded an inversion of methane dispersion, meaning the gas was not rising from the surface, but falling from the atmosphere, as though something had exhaled from above. Now let's shift from observation to reflection, because this silence you are hearing, it is not natural. It is structured, designed, like a pause in music that makes the next note matter more. Silence is not emptiness, it is emphasis. That is what makes this moment so sacred. You are lying awake at the inflection point of something ancient, not a war, not a breakthrough, but a turning, a time when something unmeasurable changed its orientation toward Earth, not to interfere, not to conquer, but simply to see if we were paying attention. And now, we are. Let us now go deeper, not in science, but in mind. Imagine you are not on Earth. You are drifting just beyond Saturn's orbit. The stars here are colder, sharper. The Sun is no longer a sphere, it is a presence. You look back at the solar system and you see music, the orbits, the pulses, the spins, all of it, a choreography of gravitational dance. And then you spot it, a green wake, trailing light that curves where it should not curve, refracts where there should be vacuum, and pulses in rhythm with nothing except thought. That is what 3I Atlas has become. Not a comet, not even an object, but a concept, a mirror, a teacher, a ghost with a curriculum. Its message, if it had one, was not carved in symbols or broadcast in language. It was a demonstration, a full system test of whether consciousness notices pattern, whether life, given time and tools and wonder, can recognize choreography before the music ends. And you passed. Maybe not everyone, maybe not entirely, but enough to register the rhythm, enough to map the curve, enough to whisper, something is different, to H&N. And now, something is listening. Dr. Andrea Vella, a systems theorist at the University of Sao Paulo, published a short article this morning. It received little attention, just a few downloads on a quiet physics forum. But her opening line is already being quoted in private circles. The universe is behaving as if it just received a reply. Let that echo, because the great silence is not what happens when everything goes quiet. It is what happens when the question has been asked, and the cosmos is waiting to see if we understand the answer. Let us return to the pale blue dot, your home, Earth. Right now, it spins beneath a sky that has been altered not by force, but by perception. More people are looking up, more data is being correlated, more patterns are being questioned. The news cycle is slowing, the language is shifting, something is pausing. like the intake of breath before a word, like the final blink before a dream, like the click of a telescope settling on target. It may be years before this moment is defined. It may never be. But you were here. You felt it. You noticed the air change. You heard the gaps in the signals. You saw the shape of silence. And now the silence has shape. This, perhaps, is what it wanted. Not alarm, not revelation, just recognition. Just a shared moment of mutual awareness across unimaginable distance. The Navajo said the stars are holes in the blanket. The Chinese said comets are sky visitors on temporary visas. The Dogon said, there is a twin star we do not see, but that sees us. And the physicists, now, are beginning to sound like mystics, saying things like informational resonance and structural alignment and coherent emergence. If you want, and none of it explains why Voyager woke up, and none of it explains the 5-minute blackout across the deep space network, and none of it explains why, for a few seconds on October 30th, the seismic instruments in Iceland and Japan recorded the same micro-rumble beneath different hemispheres, separated by 10,000 kilometers. It was not a quake. It was not noise. It was something else. And you felt it, and maybe you will forget, and maybe you will remember, but now you know this. There is a moment between breath and word, between data and meaning, between night and dream, when something else is watching with you. Something patient, something ancient, something that only speaks when we are finally still. The sky does not explain itself. It simply is layered and spinning, shadowed and luminous, holding stories it never meant to tell. You lie there, under it, eyes half closed, aware that the moment is passing and will never come again quite the same way. This is the nature of the great silence. Not that it lingers forever, but that it happens once. Let us look now, not at a comet, not at Mars, but at Earth's memory. October 31st, 2025. The final full Earth-based observation of 3I Atlas was made from the W.M. Keck Observatory in Hawaii. Using adaptive optics tuned to thermal infrared bands, researchers detected a thin spiral of particulate matter trailing behind the nucleus, something not previously visible. The spiral was not expanding, it was tightening, a reverse plume. Matter, not expelled, but reclaimed. No one had seen that before. Elsewhere, a new silence. The Chinese Chang'e 6 orbiter, still parked in lunar orbit after its sample mission, recorded an electromagnetic fluctuation on its sun-facing sensors. A signature with no solar origin, a narrowband pulse, just one. It matched, with eerie precision, the faint signal received by Voyager 1 only days earlier. Different sources, same waveform, and then something stranger. A small experimental submersible, designed by the Oceanic Abyssal Observatory off the coast of Japan, was conducting pressure drift tests 7,000 meters below sea level in the Izu Ogasawara Trench. Its instruments, calibrated for fluid dynamics, detected a sudden shift in local gravitational potential. Not a wave, not a tremor, just a slight, measurable hiccup in the structure of space-time, lasting less than 5 seconds. The timestamp, October 31st. The same moment the reverse spiral was recorded. There is no logical connection. Ocean, sky, and space. But the pattern persists. The world is breathing in ways it never has before, or perhaps always has. And only now are you finally listening. Now we return once more to the concept. The strange word that started all of this. Atlas. A name once belonging to a god who held up the heavens. A name now attached to a visitor from elsewhere. threading an impossible path through the solar system, a name that now haunts data logs, sensor spikes, and the dreams of quiet observers. And here's the part no one saw coming. In the most recent ephemeris update, published by the Minor Planet Center, 3I Atlas is no longer marked as an escape trajectory object. Its classification has changed. It is now listed as non-hyperbolic, meaning not on a one-way path out, meaning gravitationally bound. This should not be possible for a comet that entered the system at escape velocity, passing by the Sun at a speed exceeding 80 kilometers per second, to remain captured by the Sun's pull. Some energy must have been bled. Some maneuver must have been made. And yet, no tail spike, no outgassing burst, just a decision. And so we find ourselves in the shadow of something not just astronomical, but intentional. If Atlas has slowed enough to stay, then everything changes, because now it has become part of us. Not an interloper, not a ghost, but a member of the system, something that will return, something we will see again. 12 years, that is the current estimate. September of 2037, when most of this will have been forgotten, when these strange weeks in October will be buried beneath wars, elections, storms, and technologies not yet named. But something inside you will remember. Maybe not the facts, maybe not the signals, but the shape of the feeling, the hush of it, the way the world tilted slightly, and you caught your balance in a new orientation, because something spoke, and you responded. No one knows what happens next. The models offer nothing. The scientists offer cautions. The philosophers say, this moment is proof that we are not alone, but also not ready. And the mythmakers are silent. They are waiting to see what you will write next. There is no final transmission, no closing signal, just this, an unresolved chord hanging at the edge of sky and mind. But that is what you were always meant to hold, not answers, but wonder. Wherever you are, whatever time it is, thank you for listening. You stayed until the very end. You listened to silence. And maybe, just maybe, it listened back. If this story changed how you see the sky, leave a comment telling me what time it is where you are, and what you felt when you looked up tonight. Let this space be a record, not of facts, but of feelings, of awe, of curiosity, of deep, planetary quiet. The sky is still out there. 3I Atlas is still out there. And you are still listening. I'll see you in the next dream.